Hi, I'm Michael and welcome to The Pet's Journey. Today we're going to be talking about heat wave time. What are the tips and tricks in keeping your dog safe through the summer heat? Are you prepared? Well, today we're going to be visiting with Dr. Cristina in the UK. She's the author of the new pet parent book, and we're going to be breaking it down from hot paws down to spotting heat stroke. Let's not let that happen. Yes, you too can set your dog up for success in summer by just learning a few tips and tricks. Thank you for joining us, and let's jump in. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Michael. I'm your host today with Dr. Cristina. She's a veterinarian in the UK, and Dr. Cristina and I have been hanging out here in the last 6-7 months now here on Clubhouse, and we've learned so much and we've shared so much, and she has brought so much to so many people here on Clubhouse, so much knowledge. And today we're going to be just breaking into another wonderful topic, especially because August is here. And with that, I want to give a moment for Dr. Cristina to say hello to everybody.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Cristina. I'm a veterinarian and dermatologist, and I'm based in the UK. And I'm the author of the new pet parent book, A Simple Guide to Help Your Dog Thrive. It's written with love for first-time new pet parents to help them learn how they can help their dog to thrive and live a happy life. And I'm delighted to spend this time with you and talk about a very, very important topic, which is heat stroke and how to keep your dog safe in the summer heat. So let's start and see how we can keep our dogs cool this summer.
Yeah, let's keep our dogs cool. You posted in Instagram this last week, and that's what prompted me to have this conversation with you, is about how to keep your dog safe in the summer. And I was listening to the news last night, Dr. Cristina, and they were saying that this August is probably going to be one of our hottest Augusts ever. We're just, with climate change and everything, our world is changing. And so we really have to change with it and be prepared for our dogs. So one of your first talks you talk about on your Instagram post was hot paws. And I've heard this so much from other trainers and dog walkers here, and how important it is to really be mindful about how warm the cement is or the surfaces that your dog's walking on, and what it can do to your dog's paw if you're not. So where do we start with that, Dr. Cristina?
That's a very good question, a very good topic. The main concern that we have with Paws is that people actually don't realize how hot the pavement could become on a hot summer day. We have to think about, even for us, even wearing flip-flops or any summer shoes, we can feel in our feet how hot the ground could be whenever it's a very hot day. But we have to think about, dogs don't wear shoes. They don't have anything to protect their delicate part of their body, which is the pads. And although pads are designed by nature to become their soles of their feet, we have to think about that obviously they're living structures and being part of the skin, even if they've got a very, very thickened upper layer of the skin, and that's why they've got the characteristics of being so thickened and so resistant. Realistically, they can still be burned, and that's one of the most important things to remember. So if for any reason you live in a urban area and it's a very hot day, you have to think about that whenever you take your dog out for a walk, he can actually get his feet burned. So one of the things that I would normally advise to do is obviously try to avoid going out during the hottest hours of the day, and potentially even think about putting some booties on your dog to avoid this problem.
You say in your post, Dr. Cristina, about you have a test. You say, put your hand on the pavement for a few seconds. What can you explain that, just to give it like a first step of just making sure you're going in the right direction with your dog?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very easy test to do. So if you put the palm of your hand on the ground for just a few seconds and you can feel that it's really burning you, that is going to be pretty much the same that your dog is going to feel walking on it. So it's literally like walking on a beach when it's really hot. I'm sure you guys have all experienced this before. You go into a beach and then about 1 o'clock and then you forget your shoes and then you just have to walk towards the shore and then you just literally jump in like a little creature trying not to get burned. But this is kind of the same feeling that dogs could get whenever they are walking on a very hot pavement. And as such, obviously, they can't tell us really. So by the time that we get home, if we don't obviously realize about that, they're going to suffer from burns. So they're going to go even without, even worse, because potentially it could lead to infections if the skin is being really badly affected. So definitely always do the test of checking how hot the pavement is. And certainly, whenever you get home, cool them down with some hot water, with some cold water, water from a hose in your garden, or if you've got a bowl of water, just make sure that you can very quickly deep them just to remove anything that it could have stuck to the pads, but also as well to cool them down and inspect them. If they look like they are getting lighter or there is any evidence that they could be burned in any shape or form, please call your veterinarian and ask them for advice. And certainly, obviously, we will need to give them some treatment and some pain relief because burns do hurt.
That was my next question. You jumped right into it, and I love it. Is that fact? How do we know, or what's the first signs that a parent can tell that, oh, I pushed them too hard, their paws are burnt? How can they tell if their paws are burnt? Is it a redness? Do they actually get blisters? And then what's the first thing that a parent wants to do? Stick them in a bowl of ice? Where do you go? Let's talk about that.
Well, one thing that is important to learn is actually recognizing what is normal for your dog. And with this, I mean how any part of the body of your dog will look on a normal basis, okay, on a usual basis. So, for example, if your dog has got dark pads and then you inspect them on a regular basis, you will really know what they normally look like. So it would be very, very easy for you to spot whenever there is a problem because you will see the differences straight away. But generally speaking, you've got a dog that has got dark pads, as the majority of them do. You will possibly find that they are going to look really red and definitely a lighter color, and they're going to feel really tender. The dog is not going to let you touch it. Again, put yourself in their shoes. Well, they don't have any, obviously. We're trying to say.
Or put them in their shoes, right?
Exactly. Put yourself in their path, right? So basically, if you try to touch them, which they would normally let you do in normal circumstances, they would obviously pull their pad away or their feet away because it hurts. So that's a very good way to actually determine it. If you've got dogs that have got lighter color pads, sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to know. If you don't have the medical training to actually spot what a burn looks like. But I would really advise you to just kind of Google some pictures of what a burn pad will look like. So you've got an idea in your head of what to expect. But realistically, if you're careful, I think, to be honest, it's a question of common sense. And most people don't think about it. But whenever, obviously, they start putting a little bit of time into helping their dog, preventing them to get burned and obviously get really hot, they will certainly kind of think about all these little things. And it's just the same that if you had a little child, you wouldn't allow your child to go out in the middle of the day and play in the park, 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon with hot sun or whatever. So pretty much the same applies to a dog. Things that we could obviously avoid to kind of minimize any danger that we can put our dogs through.
You mentioned, we've talked about this before in other rooms as well, is, little shoes, and there are different types of shoes on the market. Do you prefer one or the other, or do you find one works better than the other?
The problem, there are certain types of shoes that they could be useful. The only problem that we have using shoes in the summer, and I know I mentioned this before, and it would be only in cases like we were talking about, like going to the beach and things like that, or potentially if you don't have a choice and you just have to let your dog out, even if it's for 5 minutes to do a wee or whatever, because you can't wait for another opportunity, that might be useful. In the summer, what we have to think about is that any material that it could prevent the dispersion of heat in any parts of the body can be detrimental to keeping our dog cool. So shoes can be useful for the purpose that we've just discussed. And if obviously you have to take your dog out in a hotter time of the day because there is no other option, certainly shoes can be useful. But there would definitely need to be a breathable material and obviously something that it could protect the pad. So in this case, even if it's just like a little cotton sock, like the baby's cotton socks, could be useful. So you don't have to go for anything that is a bit more kind kind of man-made material like plastic and things like that. I would prefer those kind of shoes.
So breathable. What about winter?
We are coming towards the winter and the opposite or end of the scale. So we're talking about very, very cold temperatures. Obviously, we can get burns, but not because of heat. It could be because of the fact that we are dealing with ice. So they can be just as bad. They're what we call thermal burns. But realistically, we could minimize as well the damage that we can get with the cold weather in the circulation because of the fact that we are protecting that area getting really cold. But realistically, with feet, they're actually helping to disperse some of the heat in the body because dogs don't have sweat glands like we do. The way that they do cool down is by panting, and is the evaporation of the heat through the panting what it actually allows them to cool down. But that's one of the reasons that why dogs actually get hot so quickly, because they can't sweat like us. And additionally, they've got a fur coat. And this is why it's so important that we are very mindful whenever we've got a hot day of what we are actually doing with our dogs and how we can help them to keep cool, because they don't have the facilities in their bodies to allow them to cope with the heat the way that we do.
So let's get back to the shoes real quick. You're surrounding us with a conversation here I think is so important for everybody to understand, is because I've heard this from so many trainers and so many dog walkers, is like what Dr. Cristina was talking about is like really look at the shoes. If you're looking for shoes for your dogs, and shoes are great for your dogs. I've been told, I'm not a trainer, I'm not a dog walker, I'm an advocate for pets. And I work with all these different people, either trainers or vets like Dr. Cristina, and they've said, make sure that when you're selecting your shoe, it's got the right pad on it. It's not going to conduct the heat. It's going to, reflect the heat, and also have it breathable. And then just on the flip side, like Dr. Cristina is saying, what you're saying, Dr. Cristina, is that it also has to be, when you go into winter, your shoe's going to change. Just like us, we wear maybe flip-flops during the summer, and maybe during winter we wear boots. And so we need to think about that the same way for our animals. So I think that's really important that, when you're looking for a product out there, be sure to really do your homework and ask other people and do your homework. Dr. Cristina, the next thing you talk about is the big one on my list. And it's so aggravating because we've all seen it. We've all been in a parking lot, and all of a sudden it's been hot outside. We're sweating, and we look and we see a dog inside a car. Even though the windows are cracked, we see the dog panting and all that, and we just panic. Let's talk about cars. Where do we go with cars from a veterinarian standpoint? What's your thoughts?
My thought is, under no circumstances leave a dog inside a car in a hot day. There is no excuse, in my opinion, to do this. There is no excuse to just pop in a shop and then just get a little bit of shopping, because we all know that 5 minutes in our head could be 15 minutes whenever you look at the clock. And the problem is, whenever it's hot outside, within literally 5 minutes, particularly whenever it's really hot, the temperature inside your car can double. And the moment that the temperature of your dog's core goes just up by 1 degree, that's already changing the metabolism inside your dog's body. And literally within 10-15 minutes, you can have a dead dog. And I'm sorry to be so blunt, but I'd rather you guys know how dangerous this is. And if you look on YouTube, there are loads of videos by vets and other pet advocates that they've done experiments sitting inside the car in a hot day, and thus with us being able to literally sweat, and they can actually experience what a dog will have to go through. And the problem is that they can't scream. They can't just tell us, please get me out. They start obviously developing this horrendous condition, which is called heat stroke. And by the time that you come back from the shop or just chatting to your neighbor next door, your dog could be dead. So please, 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 please do not ever, ever leave your dog inside a car in a hot day.
You said heat stroke. We're going to get there next. We're lucky here. I don't know if you have this, and I'm going to ask you, Dr. Cristina. Here in California, we have a law called the AB 797, and it's a California law that allows anyone to break a car window if they see a dog or a pet inside the car in the heat. Do you have anything like that in the UK?
We don't, but I think everyone is, thanks to all the campaigns to kind of raise awareness about this issue. I think the police is very keen in helping this particular subject, and they're the very first ones to actually say, if you see a dog inside a car in a hot day, please call the police. We will attend the scene, and then we can safely advise you. We can safely break the glass and get the dog out until we can locate the owner of the car. Because the problem that we have here in the UK, obviously, if you kind of break a car's window to get the dog out, is classified as criminal damage. So obviously, we have to be careful from the point of view that we are not breaking the law. But fortunately for us, most of the governmental bodies are kind of responsible and aware of the circumstances. But we don't have a law as such, as far as I'm aware here.
Yeah, we're pretty lucky here in California. So with everybody in our room today, if you're in a state that's not California and you see this, maybe even right now as we're in our room right now, Google right now and see if it's legal in your state to break the window, because we can here, and I've seen it happen before, and I think it should be a worldwide law. Dr. Cristina, let's talk about this. Heat stroke. What are the signs of heat stroke, and what do we do? What does someone do when they see these signs? What's their options?
Well, the first thing that you will normally tend to find is that your dog will start panting far more than normal. As we discussed before, dogs don't have sweat glands to their skin, so the only way that they can actually cool down is by panting. However, when they feel really, really hot inside, because the temperature outside is much higher what they would normally experience, what they do is that they start panting excessively, and in some cases, most cases, they make a really loud sound whenever they're breathing, what we call inspiratory and expiratory, because obviously part of the issue that we have with heat stroke is that as a consequence of the condition, you're going to start developing a degree of inflammation. So that will be one of the very first things that we're going to see. The second thing you will possibly find is that your dog's gums can maybe become red, bright red, which obviously would indicate that we've got some changes inside their body. Also, whenever the condition advances, and this could be very quick, by the way, it doesn't take half an hour, it could be a question of minutes, your dog could become ataxic, so they kind of start looking like they are drunk, because obviously there are some issues into the central nervous system. In some cases, they can collapse, and in very, very severe cases, they could literally go into a coma. So the very first things that we need to watch out for, obviously, if it's a hot day and you see that this is happening, is immediately to put your dog in a cool place. And then obviously call your veterinarian to tell them that this is happening, so they will tell you what you need to do and advise you to go to the practice. But put your dog in a cool place, offer them some water, and try to cool them down by splashing a little bit of water in their feet. It doesn't need to be cold water. Water at normal temperature will do. Anything that it will help to kind of conduct some of the heat and help to cool their body down will be helpful while you're actually going to the vet.
I heard, is this a rumor or is this fact? I've heard that when people cool down their dogs, sometimes they'll just like get their dog completely wet and leave them wet and leave them in the sun. Is that dangerous, or is that actually helping the dog?
I think what we are doing with cooling our dog down and leave them in the sun, from the point of view of being dangerous, I think the most important thing, if your dog is already experiencing heat stroke, is to keep them away from more heat. That's the rule number one, okay? Very, very important that we obviously offer them the possibility of drinking water, which is automatically most likely, unless your dog is ataxic or certainly unconscious, one of the very first things that their body's going to tell them to do, drink water to cool themselves down. But the problem is that if we just suddenly get hose out and start kind of literally washing them with a lot of water that is very cool, sometimes what we achieve is, particularly when we start from the top of the dog, so when we start from the dorsal lumbar area, what we are potentially achieving is a very sudden vasoconstriction of the blood vessels. So during the heat stroke, what happens is that the body trying to cool their body down is basically helping the blood vessels in their skin to dilate as much as possible, to disperse as much heat as possible to cool their body down. So whenever we suddenly cover them in very cold water, we are going to achieve the opposite effect. We are going to lead to something that we call a degree of vasoconstriction, which in other words means that the blood vessels, because of the sudden cold, they're going to literally close down. So instead of helping to disperse the heat, we might actually make more harm than good, because potentially we're going to slow down that process. So if you have to use water whenever, and obviously to help your dog cool down, one of the things that you can do, so you can do this safely, is just using normal temperature water. To start kind of watering them, but from the feet upwards, so the body can slowly cool down as you're coming up with a hose. And obviously you've got a fan that you can put in front of their feet, which is one of the areas, thanks to the pads, where they're going to help to disperse more feet. This is actually pretty effective in helping them to cool down. Instead of covering them, another thing that sometimes some people will listen and they tend to do is get like a very cold towel and put on top of the dog. We're achieving with that the same effect that we were saying about just using the hose with very cold water, because that is going to lead to the opposite effect of vasoconstriction. So what you could do is actually put the cold water as well, or the cold towel, on the floor and allow your dog to lay on it. So whenever the dog feels a little bit cool, obviously could turn around and then obviously help himself to regulate what is happening. But I think if we are at the point that we are seeing all these changes, you should actually attend your vet. And pretty much whenever this is happening, your vet will tell you to go straight down to the clinic, because it's not just a question of cooling them down. It's just to make sure that we attend all the other metabolic changes that could be happening in the body, that it could actually make your dog very sick. So if you ever see that your dog is suffering from heat stroke and you've seen all these changes, please, please, please call your vet. You can actively cool your dog down as you're driving towards the vet. But actually, attending your veterinary practice is very important in making sure that we can help your dog to overcome these issues.
It's so important that we have these tips. With that, Dr. Cristina, I do want to say we're talking about right now, you're talking about water and you keep talking about temperature of water. And I notice on your post, you say not icy, not, just cool water. Is there a reason why not icy water? Because I would think some people, like, let's say they want to run into Starbucks and grab a glass of water of ice and just give it to their dog because it's going to cool them down. Why not icy water?
Just exactly for the same reason that we've just discussed. Whenever your body is really, really hot, obviously we all like a cold beer, right? But obviously we are not suffering from heat stroke. So what I'm trying to say with that is that if we suddenly go from having a core temperature of 40 and suddenly we get a really icy cold water, that could actually cause a degree of vasoconstriction as well, and not in just outside, but also it could lead to some vasoconstriction as well in the organs, which obviously could lead to more problems. So I think the key here to remember is whatever temperature the water is going to be is going to be lower than the temperature that the body is at the time. So any kind of temperature water, and I'm talking about, like normal room temperature, will be beneficial, because it's just not necessarily the effect of the cooling effect of the water being drunk. It's also the fact that we are actually giving all these very, very important fluids that your dog will need to help get the blood pressure and the circulation going. Because one of the downsides of heat stroke is all the metabolic effects is obviously produce something that we call hypovolemia. It's going to affect how much fluid is actually circulating in the bloodstream, and that could have catastrophic consequences whenever that's not addressed on time. And that's the reason what I'm saying, whenever that happens, you need to go to your vet immediately. They will keep your dog, and then obviously start on IV fluid therapy and do some other tests to make sure that there is not being permanent damage in their body. But whatever water temperature you have, even if it's not so hot, not so cool temperature that you just grab from someone who's got a bottle of water in their handbag or their rucksack, any water will be useful.
What about if somebody's, like, let's say at a park or a recreation center and they see their dogs overheated and all that, and let's say there's a lake there. Is it okay for dogs to be drinking lake water?
I think with lake water, again, if we put out, what we are at in terms of the dangers for the dog, the immediate danger for the dog, if the dog is hot, we need to cool it down. Any water is better than no water. So even if it's lake water, the dog will drink what it needs to drink to cool itself down. And obviously we can help it, as we said, just kind of helping to submerge the feed into the water, just to help it to cool down, etc., etc. And it depends also how hot the dog is. So you've got dogs that they are panting a little bit, you give them the opportunity to just cool down, and then within a few minutes they are back to normal. And then you've got the full range of the heat stroke, which is a completely different matter, because that's a far more advanced stage that it needs veterinary attention. The only downside of lake of lake water is the potential contamination of the water. And if it's a very clean lake, no problem. But certainly when we are talking about lakes, they don't have a way, or we don't have a way that we can actually control if we've got any green algae or we've got any other parasites. So potentially, that could be another danger in itself. But if you're in the middle of nowhere and your dog is suffering from heat stroke, we have to do something immediately. So realistically, if we've got no water and then you've got a lake next to it and your next veterinarian is about an hour away, we have to do something at that time in order to save our dog's life. So we will potentially can help him like that. Hopefully that lake is not suffering from the likes of green algae. And I don't know, you guys suffer from that potential problem there in the States and various areas. Green algae obviously could be also very, very dangerous for your dog. And it would be a fatal combination for a dog to drink lake water with green algae and then suffer from heat stroke at the same time, because green algae per se can make them really sick. So it will be a very good thing for everyone to actually learn what green algae in water in lakes would look like. But realistically, if you are out and about with your dog, you as a responsible pet parent, I would really advise you to always have not just a 2-liter bottle of water for yourselves, but also one for your dog, because your dog needs water as much as you do. So a responsible pet parent should always have water for the dog in the rucksack. So if a situation like this arises, then you are prepared. And it's about preparation. It's about knowing what to do so you can help your dog to live the best life possible.
Well, you mentioned this too about shade and water inside your Instagram post as well, is that water. Is it better to start your dog on a lot of water if you're going to go out for the day? Does that help by just giving them extra water before you go out?
I think with dogs, they are like us, it's like trying to make a child drink before they go out. It's bad enough trying to get them in the toilet, let alone to drink more water. But I would say it would be a good idea to make sure that you offer your dog water on a regular basis. So if you've got a trip planned, obviously always have some water. And I'm sure you guys have air conditioning in the UK. We do that also, because the highest temperature that we get in the summer is about 20 degrees. They last for a few days, usually in Ontario, in the UK. But if you've got air conditioning, always travel with your dog with air conditioning in the car. However, regardless of that aspect, always have do like little stops throughout the journey. That could be every half an hour or every hour. Do a little stop and then offer your dog a little bit of water. That will help them to be hydrated and ready for whatever you've got planned at the end of the journey.
So we were always talking about baby steps. Just keep them hydrated throughout the day, keep them cool throughout the day, have a safe trip. Don't leave your dog in the car. I do like the fact that there are car companies out there like Tesla that actually has a cool mode for their car, so that if you do leave your dog in the car, it actually has a pet mode now that actually keeps your dog cool on the newer models. And I just love that cars are becoming so in touch with all of our lives and even our pets' lives. Is there anything else that we need to be worried about during the summer with our dogs, Dr. Cristina?
Well, in regards to heat, my best advice to you, it would be just to remember, always think about how our dogs will feel if it's a hot summer day. So if that's the case and it's going to be hot the next day, just prepare yourself. Take the dogs out for a walk very early in the morning and quite late at night, and just allow them to go to the toilet at lunchtime very quickly. And in that way, we can minimize the effects of the heat on their body. Also, as we discussed before, just keep them hydrated throughout the day. Make sure that they've got areas where they've got shade available at all times and water available at all times. Even if they leave outside, please make sure that this is actually established wherever you go, because that's absolutely vital to avoid heat stroke, as we said. And if you are planning to move to another area of the country where it's going to be much warmer, it's always a good idea to acclimatize your dog as much as possible to that area. It's been shown that whenever dogs actually live in an area that is warmer, like the military dogs, they eventually become acclimatized within about a month to 2 months. But obviously, whenever you're there, just making sure that, that they've got all these facilities that we were talking about, and you see that over time, their body will get used to these higher temperatures, but it would be necessary to have a period of adaptation, like it will happen to us if we were to move to a hotter country. So that would be my top tips for the day.
So really get acclimated. I love that. Dr. Cristina, the other thing I want to say is exercise. That was on your Instagram too. Avoid exercise, and I know a lot of people want to exercise their dogs. What's your points on those?
Well, pretty much, if we think about everything that we discussed in the last half an hour, we know that whenever it's hot outside, that's going to increase their body temperature, their core body temperature. But on top of that, we take them out for a walk, even if it's a 5-10 minute walk, that's going to increase their body temperature even more. Obviously, dogs need to exercise. We know, but this is why it's so important that whenever we do that in a hot summer day, we do it at the lowest temperature in the day. So either very early in the morning, and if this actually means an earlier start for us, well, we are responsible pet parents, so this is part of the of the deal having a dog. And if we have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, then it'll be it. And maybe quite late at night. But please do not take your dogs out for a walk at lunchtime. Here in the UK, and because people are not used to this heat, that was actually last week. We had higher temperatures than normal. And I'm talking about 26, 27 degrees, which is quite rare for this time of the year because we don't normally tend to reach that temperature. And I saw so many people going out with their dogs at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which in reality is madness because it was really warm at that time. It was 27, 28 degrees. Additionally, one thing I forgot to mention is that when we are dealing with brachycephalic breeds, and with this I mean all the flat-faced dogs, they've got the additional challenge that because their upper respiratory system or upper respiratory way is somehow not as functional as it would happen with any other dogs, their capability to cool down panting is also affected. So if we put all these factors together, a little 10-minute walk could be catastrophic when it's done at a very high or the hottest time of the day. So please avoid any exercise during this period and take your dogs out for a walk in the morning and late at night. And hopefully at that time, the temperature will be cooler, your dog will be happier, and we will minimize any detrimental effects on our dog's body.
Beautiful. Hey, let's jump to Lindsay right now. Hey, Lindsay, how are you doing? Good to see you here on Clubhouse.
Hi, guys. So as you can see from the little flag, I'm in the UK as well, but I'm down south. I'm in Portsmouth. And down south, like Dr. Cristina mentioned, last week we had an unusual heat wave. But in addition to that, we had very high humidity. We're talking late 70s, high 80s. And Dr. Cristina, you mentioned brachycephalic dogs. I've had 2 Cavaliers, as you can see from my profile. But because they have a snout, they're kind of borderline, but I am told that they do count as brachycephalic dogs. Now, my question is, do certain illnesses affect how well a dog can handle heat? My reason being, I have a 3-year-old Cavy who has epilepsy. And her epilepsy, she actually had a seizure last Saturday, and I swear it was triggered by the heat. And I have a 9-month-old Cavy that was born with congenital kidney disease, so renal dysplasia, and she's already in stage 2 of kidney failure, and she drinks tons as it is. Now, would those 2 conditions mean that they can handle the heat even less well?
Hi, Lindsay. I'm so glad to hear that you're here in the UK, and thanks for your question. Very, very important. So you know what I mean with last week, don't you?
Well, apparently we have another week of 28 degrees coming up, so that's why I was really keen for this talk.
And
excellent. Well, we'll be very happy to help you.
Can I share real quick for everybody in the room? If you're not in the UK or you're not familiar with Celsius, 28 degrees.
Celsius, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Celsius is actually like 82 degrees here in the United States or anywhere else. And so just to give you Fahrenheit versus Celsius, when they're talking about it's warm in the UK, and it's really 28 is really warm for the UK. So take it over, Dr. Cristina.
Thanks, Michael, for clarifying that. Yeah. We are so used to Celsius here. I mean, sometimes. Yeah. Right, Lindsay, answering your question, you are totally right. Well, first of all, with cavies, yes, they are not classified as brachiocephalics per se, but I would agree with you that depending on the dog, particularly on the conformation, these could have a knock-on effect on their capability to obviously disperse heat through panting. In regards to additional conditions that it could affect their heat. In both cases, you are correct. First of all, whenever we are talking about very young dogs, and with this I mean puppies and younger dogs, such as, dogs that they are juvenile puppies or juvenile dogs, such as 5, 6, 7, 8 months old, they are not adults per se, but particularly the very young ones, they don't regulate the heat as well as adult dogs do. So they are not going to be capable to actually control the way that their body copes with the heat. And as such, they are potentially affected by the heat more than an adult dog will do for the very same reason. But realistically, when we are talking about other conditions that could affect dogs, absolutely, dogs that they suffer from what we call concomitant conditions, such as any systemic disease, and or dogs that they are older, so those that they are obviously 10, 11, 12 plus, again, like young babies, they can't regulate the heat as well as an adult and healthy dog would do. So they're the two extremes of the scale that we have to be extra careful with. And obviously those dogs that they're affected by diseases, as we said, concomitant conditions such as epilepsy and things like that, certainly some drugs could also affect the way that the body can deal with things. And I'm not saying that epileptic drugs would be one of those, but what I'm trying to say is that for dogs that they've got other issues, it's very, very important we take those into consideration. Put it this way, if your dog would be a dog that lives in Dubai, for example, 28 degrees Celsius, whatever that is in Fahrenheit, I think 82. You said, Michael?
Yeah, 82.
82 would be nothing. It would be like spring, okay? But for a dog living in the UK, that's a lot of heat to deal with in their body because they are not used to it. This week, for example, we've gone from the extreme heat to the temperature that we've got this week. So we just dropped 10 degrees all of a sudden. So that's the normal temperature that we'll feel comfortable with. So potentially that could have been stress related, not necessarily because of the heat stress, but because of the fact of being stressed about what the situation was. So any extra pressure that we are going to put in her body because of the heat would obviously have more of a detrimental effect on how her metabolism can cope with it, with everything that is going around. So looking ahead of the next heat wave, trying to keep your dogs as cool as you can. So even if you just get a fan on all day in one of the rooms of the house, something I read the other day and could be useful, and by all means you're welcome to try it, is just get a bottle of water and put it in the freezer. So the water is frozen as ice in the freezer, and apparently put it in front of the fan. So as the temperature in the room actually cools, the air coming through that cold water would actually cool the air. So that's something that you can do. It's a very cheap way of doing air conditioning. But anything that you can do to keep your dogs cool, obviously the fan on, water all the time. If your dogs have a very long coat, sometimes, and this will be a conversation to have with the groomers, anything like that will help and keep them hydrated all day long. And then obviously, as we said, avoid the heat, just keep them indoors, even if with the doors if you've got patio doors, they just keep them opened and then trying to keep them cool. That's really as much as we can do. But yes, just being sensible and using your, just using your common sense really. So, but no, it sounds like you're doing everything right, really, really well, Lindsay.
Yeah, no, I don't walk them at 2 in the afternoon, and I feel like strangling people that I see doing that.
Me too.
Thank you for coming up, Lindsay. It's always nice to see you. And
thank you, Michael.
Yeah, and there's so many people we always feel like strangling, and you just have to have empathy for people because they just don't know sometimes, and we don't know what we don't know. And that's one of the things I love about here on Clubhouse. I've learned so much. I've been on Clubhouse since January, and I've learned so much about pets and just the love of pets, and just like we're here to love your pet. We're here to help you love your pet and just learn what we don't know. I've learned so much here that I never knew about pets. And so Dr. Cristina, like what we're talking about with Lindsay here, it sounds like to me, it's like if your dog has an immune issue or some sort of thing going on with them, that's even more reason to be really particular about when you bring your dog out in the heat and keeping them cool and comfortable, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, sometimes the easiest way to put ourselves in their shoes is to think about us. If you were really poorly or you were suffering from a chronic condition, your body will struggle to cope with the normal circumstances of basically being out and about in a beach day, and you'll be like wanting to sit down all the time and keeping yourself cool because your body is already, I wouldn't say struggling, but coping in the best way possible to deal with that condition. If additionally we put the extra stress, and I mean stress not necessarily because they're feeling a stress because there's an unusual environmental change, but if you put the body through the stress of having to cope with very high temperatures outside, that strained body is going to have to work even harder to keep things going. So definitely, again, if you've got a very young puppy, so you've got puppies up to 3-4 months old particularly, or you've got an old dog, or there's certainly a dog that is suffering from any other diseases, they're going to be in even higher risk category of suffering from conditions like heat stroke if we are not careful. So again, common sense, I think, applies in this particular case, and just basically put yourself in their shoes, or in their paws in this case.
In their paws. I love that. Yes. And that's so important. And I think that's what we're talking about here is just bringing the awareness together as a whole and just say, hey, look, we are getting ready to have we've already had a hot summer. I know here in Los Angeles, we've had summer. You're talking about that you've had increased levels of heat in your area, Dr. Cristina. But as a whole, I heard last night on the news, like I said, they're expecting such an incredible heat wave here in the States in this next month. August, they said, is just going to be a really hot, unbearable month here. And it's just bringing the awareness to everybody, because what we're talking about here so far, we're saying, how do we keep our dogs safe? We've talked about, look at their paws, check out their paws, make sure their paws are cool, and don't put them on hot pavement. If you're going to be putting them, go for a walk, put your hand down on the pavement, like Dr. Cristina said, and feel that pavement. If you can't keep your hand on that pavement, don't expect your dog's paws to be able to withstand that heat either. Then next, be careful about cars. I know we want to go on road trips. I know we want to run to go grab a coffee real quick, and we love our dogs and we want to take them everywhere. Think twice about taking them on those small immediate trips to the store, because like Dr. Cristina said in the beginning of the room, sometimes we run into a store and we think we're going to be there for 15 minutes or 5 minutes, and next thing you know, it's 30 minutes because there's this, or you forgot that, and next thing you know, you forgot that you have your dog in a car outside in the heat, and maybe you get there in the morning and it starts to heat up. So there's so many things. Be aware of putting your dog in a car. Really important. The next thing is shade and water, like Dr. Cristina said. It's so important that we make sure our dogs have water throughout the day. So if you are taking them out and you're taking them on a trip or something like that, just like for you, have a bottle of water, have another bottle of water for your dog, and keep them hydrated during the whole day, and just keeping them in the shade and keep them out of the direct heat. And avoid exercise at this time. This time is like so important for us not to put extra pressure or demands on their bodies, because they're already dealing with that extra heat that they're trying to stay away from their bodies. And the last thing is just keep your eye and your pulse on their finger of their health and what's going on with their health, because heat stroke does happen to dogs. How often does that happen to dogs, Dr. Cristina?
You mean how often does heat stroke happen to dogs?
Yes. How often do you see that dogs come in with heat stroke with you?
Well, fortunately, because the weather here in the UK, it doesn't get to the temperatures that we were just spoken about before. Fortunately for us, we don't see it very often. Saying that, actually, not that long ago, I had a dog that is starting to show signs of heat stroke while he was hospitalized with us, and he was a very brachycephalic dog. And just the fact of being in a kennel, with not and getting the stress of being in there had a knock-on effect, and her body was actually getting hotter and hotter within literally 20 minutes of being in the kennel. That was a very scary thing to witness. But anyway, she was fine after all. We put in practice all these measures that we talked about, and within a little while, she'd actually go back to normal. But what I'm trying to say is that even with lower temperatures, that could have a knock-on effect on your dog. So we shouldn't really see heat stroke, and I hope you don't have that problem ever with your dog. But certainly it can happen to any dog, and it can happen at any temperature above 25, okay? So please always be careful and be prepared. And as Michael said, it's all about knowing what to do when that happens. So you are not in the position that whenever that situation arises, you just basically go into a panic and you don't know how you can help your dog. So being prepared is the most important thing.
Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you think we should touch on about keeping your dog safe in the summer heat?
I think we pretty much have spoken about everything, I think.
Dr. Cristina, thank you so much for being here. I just adore you, and I love your passion. And everybody in the room, thank you for sharing this space with us together.
Thank you, everyone, for staying with us, and have a wonderful day, afternoon, evening.
Cheers. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Wow, what a wonderful room with Dr. Cristina from the UK. I'm Michael, your host here on The Pet's Journey. We were talking about keeping your dog safe in the summer sun. Please, let's keep our dogs safe and keep them cool. Just like us, they get overheated. So with that, I would love to say to you guys, have a wonderful, wonderful day and keep coming back to The Pet's Journey. I'm Michael, your host, and I'm out. Hey, and before you go, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the like button so you can hear more wonderful topics on how to be the perfect pet parent. Thanks.